ahead and, well, I'll call the meeting to order, and then if you could go ahead and start roll.
Yes. Roll is just, or I guess the recording has just started. And so I can go through roll now. Christina Puri does not appear to be here. Kirk Will.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Kirk. Amy Moyer. Hopefully joining later. John Ring. I see you, John. Hopefully you're with us. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. Brett Wolk. Katie McGrath Novak.
Present.
Hi, Katie. And Commissioner Clyde Church.
Can you hear me? No?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
now we can hear you.
All right. Present.
thank
Hi,
you.
John. Nice to
Yeah.
have you.
Mhm.
And I see that Amy Moyer just joined us too. Yeah, hi, everyone.
Hello. And I think Brett said he was going to join at some point today, so
Okay.
awesome. And I don't believe we have any minutes to approve, so we can just go ahead and jump right in. So the first thing on the agenda is an update on the Colorado Forest Resilience Planning Guide one-pager. Just for some context, if you were not at the last couple of meetings, in our most recent quarterly meeting, we shared our four-pager, and people liked it, but we also saw some utility in doing an even shorter one-pager that's a little bit more clear about, like, this is exactly what the guide is, this is how you can use it, this is your kind of call to action around the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. So Lynn Elliott she's a newly appointed Colorado Forest Health Council member in the insurance space. And she had volunteered to let us use some people from her team to do like a nice, well-edited one-page type document. And at the last meeting, I was unsure if she meant just kind of the formatting side of things, or if they actually could help us with the wordsmithing as well. And she said that she actually has some background in publishing. And so she said that she can help us with the content portion of that, and then send it to her team for the formatting and making it beautiful side of that. So I think that's great. We just will now need a team to at least do a draft for Lynn. So we have kind of our group that typically meets around the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, but I wanted to see if anyone else would like to volunteer to be involved in that. And I can follow up after this meeting with anyone who's interested. So maybe just a show of hands if you want to help out with that one pager.
Sure.
All right, we got one hand. Thank you, Clyde. And we can send an email out to the rest of the group as well. And I think what we'll do is have a couple of people draft up the one pager, and then of course we will share the draft with the full group. And I see your chat, Laura. Thank you. And I'll reach out to that whole initial team that helped with the four pager as well. So does that timeline sound okay? I'm thinking we can try and have a draft of the one pager hopefully before the next meeting and then send it out for review. And I just saw a couple more people join us, Commissioner Shattuck McNally and Brett Wolk. I just gave an update on the one pager, and Lynn Elliott can help us write it, and then her team can help us format it. So I'm thinking we'll get kind of a smaller team together separately to work on that, and then send out a draft for feedback before the next meeting, hopefully.
Yeah, that sounds great. You can sign me up to be on the small team.
Cool.
I don't know if that already happened, but
I kind of assumed I was going to reach out to the people who worked on the 4-pager as well. So I was going to rope you in that way. Awesome. Any other questions or feedback on that? I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for our presentation. So
Maybe, can I add one more thing on the resilient guide?
yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to flag as I think some of us are participating in the goals and actions for the 30-year vision as part of the functioning forest and resilient watershed goals and actions. I recommended some sort of goal or surrounding institutionalizing the use of this resilience planning guide. So I just wanted to flag that out there for others that might be participating in those work groups, and maybe there's a way for us to continue to brainstorm what that would look like to link into the 30-year plan that's also occurring within the Forest Health Council. So just a quick flag there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's a good, I'll make a note to generally tie the guide and the 30-year vision together in that 1-pager somehow for broader context.
yeah, I think that's a great flag, Amy. And I think encouraging people it's a really valuable resource too. We did that same with the Forest Tracker when we did a webinar of like, here's how the Forest Tracker fits into the guide and where you can use it, and then all the different stages and the different activities and actions and reporting and planning and all the different things. So continuing to use it is a comprehensive resource. I think that's where we're struggling a little bit of like, what's the big overview? And then it is more comprehensive than other things. So, but yeah, I think I find it really useful to give people a little grounding of like, here's how all the swirling parts actually fit together in a systematic way. One other flag, I don't know, just kind of to make sure we clarify as we're going about communicating this, what was the Colorado post-fire playbook just recently got updated and released. And I don't have the name right in front of me, but they changed the name. It's not post-fire playbook now. It's a fire planning playbook. Someone else know? It's more comprehensive to be used in more situations and is closer to in name our guide. It is still much more concise and focused in different ways, but I foresee some confusion between the two documents coming. That's what I wanted to flag for you all.
I don't know the new name of that, but I'll try and dig that up and we can also send that as a follow-up. Cool, good flags. I'm noting all these in my notes. Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to transition into our presentation. Just as a kind of overview, I asked the presenters today to touch on kind of two things. So one is share an overview of Colorado State Forest Service grant programs that may be addressing one or more of the key challenge buckets that we have identified in this committee, which I'll go over those in a second as a reminder. And we don't expect all of the grant programs to touch on all of them, but just kind of getting a feel for what's being done in these different challenge areas. And then I also asked them if there are barriers or hesitations in addressing any of the challenges that we have identified. What do those challenges or barriers look like from a funder perspective, and what might we as a committee want to keep in mind as we move forward with coming up with recommendations? So that's kind of what I asked for in this presentation. And as a reminder, the 4 challenge buckets that we've kind of been circling around with this committee are capacity. So capacity to compile plans, prioritize landscapes, gather data, translate data, all of that good stuff. 2 is match. which we've talked about a lot, how communities and organizations struggle to find match, especially early on when efforts or collaboratives are just getting started. 3 is the timeline lag or timeline mismatch between applications and deadlines and projects and all of those moving pieces. And lastly is a lack of focus on earlier stages of readiness. So if you're looking through the stages of readiness framework or the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, there tends to be a lot of funding and capacity available in the later stages when you're translating your strategy into action and when you're scaling out, but there's less focus from most funding sources on establishing your community of partners around a shared vision and translating your vision into a strategy. And so trying to kind of play catch up to get to those later stages can be difficult. So those are the 4 challenge buckets that we've been talking about. And that's about all the context I have for you. So I'll pass it over to our wonderful presenters. Today we have Kayla Montrose, who's a forestry program specialist, and Chad Julian, who is a wildfire mitigation program specialist, both from the Colorado State Forest Service.
Thanks, Katie. We thought that we would start by just giving a brief presentation on one of our state grant programs, the Furworm Grant Program, Forest Restoration and Wildfire Risk Mitigation, and then one of our federal grant programs, the CWDG Grant Program that Chad will speak on, just to give a quick overview of each of those, and then we can kind of jump into the bigger discussion. So I'm going to share my screen really quick. Make sure you guys can see the presentation.
Looks good.
Okay, perfect. So I manage the Furworm Grant Program. So just gonna go through a brief background on this. Furworm is one of our biggest state-funded grant programs that we manage around the state. It's been around since 2017, and it was a consolidation of the Colorado Forest Restoration Grant Program that was previously administered by CSFS and the Wildfire Risk Reduction Grant Program that was previously administered by the Department of Natural Resources. So it's a competitive grant cost share program that supports community level actions across the state with the purpose of reducing the risk of wildfire to people, property, and infrastructure in the wildland-urban interface, and promoting forest health and forest restoration projects and encouraging wood utilization. Just about anybody can apply for it, primarily HOAs, local government entities, state agencies, utilities, including water providers that have infrastructure or land in areas with high risk of wildfires, nonprofit groups that promote hazardous fuels reduction treatment projects, as long as they meet the intent of Furworm and benefit more than one property owner, they are allowed to apply. We allow 2 different project types. One is fuels and forest health projects that reduce hazardous fuels and promote forest health, and the other is the capacity building project type that provides communities with the resources and staffing necessary to plan and implement those fuels and forest health projects. And so that can be through increased staffing, equipment purchases, or planning efforts. And then Furworm proposals are required to utilize forest products or woody materials generated from those projects, and also obtain county level support. There's a 50% match requirement for all projects and a reduced match opportunity for those that fall within an area of fewer economic resources, and that is defined through our social vulnerability index layer within the Colorado Forest Atlas. Proposals will receive additional preference if they show additional financial leverage, if they adopt local measures that reduce wildfire risks, such as CWPPs or participating in Firewise USA, If they partner with youth or veterans groups for any of their project work, and if their projects result in protection of water supplies. So that's just a really quick overview of Furworm. I'm going to hand it over to Chad to do the same for the CWDG grant program.
Thanks, Kayla, and I'll have you advance when I say, since you've got control of the PowerPoint there
Of
in your computer. Chad Julian, I'm a wildfire mitigation program specialist with Colorado State Forest Service. And I'm going to talk about CWDG, the Community Wildfire Defense Program, CWDG, the acronym as we know it. It was a grant program that is fairly new, and it was developed to help at-risk local communities and tribes, of course, reduce wildfire risk. It came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law that came out of the previous administration and previous Congress. I think it was 2021 that got voted on, or 2022. It's a 5-year program, so there have been 3 rounds so far, and there will be a round 4 here in the next year. It does prioritize communities that have very high wildfire hazard potential, that are low income, and that have been impacted by severe disturbances. There's 2 types of projects we can fund, whether they could either develop and revise an existing community wildfire protection plan, and the max you can get on that's $250,000. Or if you have a CWPP that is fairly young, you can implement projects out of that and ask for up to $10 million. Next slide. Next slide there, Kayla. There we go. So the CWPP implementation projects, in order to have the kind of qualifying activities, we can't do this on Fed ground. And there is a cost share proposal that Congress put into this that if they were underserved, and we've now had to take that tool away as of February, but that was one way we could waive the match, is if it's an underserved community and there was the climate and economic justice tool we were using from the federal government for that purpose. That now has went away as of February, and the only thing we can do now on the cost share match waiver is if it's low income. Next slide. They cannot be used on federal government lands. The grant is for a total of 5 years. It's better if they have a roofing ordinance, which is something they're trying to encourage folks that are doing these wildfire risk reductions to have. Next slide. And communities that have requested funds, there's some ways that we want to make sure they have an actual plan in place for what they're implementing. If their CWPP is less than 10 years old, that's good. If it's older than 10 years, that's not current enough for us to feel confident that what they've agreed upon and what they've planned is what's going to be implemented. And it's better if the CWPP is more detailed and has had actual projects in it. A lot of them do not and are very general. If they don't have a CWPP, we've been able to do some approval of FEMA approved hazard mitigation plans if they have a wildfire section and it's robust enough. Next slide. The other thing that Congress introduced with this is they asked 3 questions, and I'm going to share those with you so you at least know what they are. Does it benefit a low-income community? If it does, that's 10 points. If it doesn't, that's 0. So there's not a gradation of scoring there. So low-income communities are being prioritized by this question if they can answer yes. Next question, or next slide. The second one is, have they been impacted by a severe disaster? And if they have in the last 10 years or less, then we can list that. And if they have had that severe disturbance, how has it affected the current wildfire risk? So a drought declaration from 2020 from Governor Polis, how does that affect wildfire risk in 2025? We have to answer those questions to get the 10 points, yes or 0, if you don't have that here. And then next slide. The last question is, does the project have high wildfire hazard potential? Notice that isn't risk, it's hazard. It's more general and broad, and that's a 20-point question. By grading these 3 questions up front with applicants, If you answer yes to all three, you're getting 40 points. If you answer no, you're getting 0. And we know that they fund only for implementation projects, for instance. You have to score an 87 out of 100 or higher to get it. So if you've missed, you can't miss more than 13 points. So that's how we're able to use these priority funding questions as kind of a way to screen. Next slide. The last two pieces here are what is the U.S. Forest Service role? They are administering the program for Congress, but they don't have the staff and program capacity to award these grants and manage them. So the Colorado State Forest Service has opted in to do that. And we do get some base funding. It's not enough, as folks on the folks can imagine, to manage those grants, award them, help develop new applications, and those kind of things. So it helps fund some technical staff like myself and finance staff. And then next slide. What we did do after round 2 is we were not involved in helping to develop the applications for round 2. We chose to be involved in helping to develop those applications for round 3. And these were the things I learned from round 2 that we needed to pay attention to. Do they have the financial capacity, as these are reimbursement grants? Are the targets attainable? If we're purchasing equipment, is that listed even on the application, and are we following the rules? That's a more cumbersome process to do that. Have they begun work prior to the award? We had that happen in round 2. The time frame from application to award, which deals with one of your bins here, these time lags that can occur from when you apply to when you're implementing on the ground and when you finish the grant. Resources to assist in the development of the application. We ramped up that for round 3, and it's giving us a much better return on investment. And then match confusion. There is a lot that we'll talk about here as we go through our discussion related to those. I think that's the last slide I have. No, I guess there is this last one. Just to give you an idea, we had 40 applications in round 2. 9 got awarded for $28 million. Gives you an idea of how most of them were CWPPs and very limited on the implementation. And the match was waived on 8 out of the 9. That's a fairly big deal. Round 3, we did have CSFS staff involved in the development. We developed 30 applications. I wanted a lower number. I wanted them to be more competitive and higher quality. And we asked for $67 million. I think we're going to get 10 to 15 awards greater than $30 million. And we wanted to see an increase in implementation applications. We were able to achieve that. We were able to really work on maximizing how we could waive this match and not have that be a barrier and a hurdle among the majority of these 30 for the partners we were serving. And then we wanted to be efficient and effective at how these things are going to get implemented by what's written and promised in that grant application. So that's the last slide I have. Kayla and I have a lot of notes and other things we can talk about as we enter more of a discussion phase here, and you folks have questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And for those asking in the chat, yeah, it would be great to get those slides, and we'll share them out. A lot of good information there. So yeah, maybe we can open up to some initial questions right off the bat, and then kind of maybe work through some of the challenge buckets, or if you had discussion questions in mind, we can go through those. So any questions up front from anyone? John Ring, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just curious. I'm surprised that that funding survived the new administration change, the bill funding, because we lost a lot of that here at BLM. So I'm just surprised. It's more of a comment than a question, I guess. So
yeah, it was at risk for a short time where they were not reimbursing us on previously signed agreements, and that was kind of risky in February and into early March. They decided to honor previously signed agreements in early March. That helped us to continue to move the existing projects forward. I think they saw that this was part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it was safer as a non-target, I think, due to that. And a lot of the communities that are benefiting tend to be more of our rural communities and counties right now when I look at, where did we award money in round 2. So.
Yeah, I had the same thought as well. Commissioner Shattuck McNally has a hand raised.
Well, we happen to be one of those counties. Can you hear me okay? Because I'm not used to using my headphones, but they're decided that they're demanding that I use them today.
Yep,
We were one of those that were frozen, or we found out they were frozen. And so I spent a lot of time meeting with our 3 congressional districts and our 2 senators to talk about the importance of that funding and why it was important, and met with some of them one-on-one, face-to-face, even in DC. And that was almost the next day. Or actually, literally that morning, we happened to have a meeting with a new congressional representative for Larimer County for a new district, and just happened to have a very timely meeting that they had asked for. And so I was very aggressive with outreach and explaining that. So I agree with you. I think they kind of just put it all under one big umbrella, that they wanted to kind of pause. But as I understand it, ours is still going forward. I was just on a tour on Friday with the roadside mitigation tour up in Red Feather and Crystal Lakes, and meeting with lots of representatives and looking at some of the mitigation work that's already doing and some of the things they're looking at for the project and the needs. So getting to ride along and see what's looking at with our team. But we feel very fortunate to have that and to be able to do that work, and to have that grant funding. It's going to really expand, and we have a lot of people involved. So I just have to say, some of us were jumped on that right away and put a lot of pressure on to not freeze those or take that back. And I'm glad there is another round, and thank you for your work, because I think they are going to be really move the needle, not as much as we hope, but I think they're really going to move a needle in a lot of ways. So thank you.
awesome. Yes, it's good to have people out there fighting for these things. So other initial questions, comments, sparked ideas from the presentation?
If I just might, are you going to go back? Is there any mechanism or anybody who's going to go back and look at the projects that were funded and kind of have a report out, or share some data, or share photos of the stories or some of the work that was done, and also maybe track further, maybe if there is another wildfire or something, track how those all if any of those treatments or anything helped with reducing the risk, or helped if there is we know it's going to happen, but when. And so I'm just curious if there's any follow-up or information gathering or any studies with these projects.
I'll jump on that, Jody. For CWDG and that specific grant program, I'm setting up some structures to have some different reporting and different pictures, and I'm expressing to a lot of the folks on the projects from round 2 in particular that I know the congressional delegation is going to ask for some things to go look at, and I want a lot of high quality to choose from. I don't want to have to bare bones that and not have some options to choose from that are, doing good work and have good quality on the ground. So I'm going to be watching that closely to make sure we do have good stories to tell, good pictures to have, and we're highlighting, what's happening with those projects. If we do happen to have a wildfire encounter one of these treatments, I'll be definitely very interested in that. And probably one of the first people I'm going to call is Brett Walk on this call right here, because I'm going to ask, can they help look into some post-fire treatment, work on how effective we were or not. They've had experience in that at CFRI many times, So yeah, I sense that we'll be on top of what your concerns were there, and we'll be watching that closely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to let you know that we have some experience out here in Plata County with the 416 fire. We helped stop that, so we've got some really good pictures and video on the 416. So that would be any use.
Yeah, that always is, and I think it was the Glacier View subdivision. Is that the subdivision or down there by Durango that was affected by that fire that had some video out related to show how the subdivision survived? Is that the one you're referring to?
Falls Creek Ranch.
Yeah, Falls Creek. Yep.
Yeah, Glacier View is up in my area.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can get it over to.
Yeah, I would take that if you have that.
All right.
Clive, is that a CWDG project?
Firmware.
Oh, okay, cool.
But it's,
It's a little of several.
Thanks for clarifying. Brett, go ahead.
Yeah, or Diana or other state forest service, you want to jump in and clarify before I ask a question?
I was thinking that Kayla probably wanted to jump in and talk about our monitoring program, and especially with furworm. There's a lot there.
oh, yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll set the stage then, because we're all on the same page. Yeah, I loved your comment, Chad, but I think this is a perfect example also of pointing back to the Forest Resilience Planning Guide. Of Chad, you talked about using resources to make sure you have plans that you can implement and the people to do it and the right, funding in the right place. That's a lot of outlined in this Forest Resilience Planning Guide, and then also talks about the importance of monitoring and showing those outcomes later on the project. So yeah, I think this is just another great example. And I would have a question with the State Forest Service. You shared some of the resources of the Colorado Forest Atlas, and there's lots of great planning tools that you all have and have referenced. But I'm curious what other resources, Chad, as you were going in from round 2 to 3, the Forest Resilience Planning Guide wasn't available. What did you use? What did you find useful? What did you not find useful?
Oh yeah, I will say, Brett, on the CWDG, it was prescribed for us what we had to use to meet those minimum funding requirements, like on low income or hazard potential or disaster declaration. We had to and were required to use the CWDG tool. And I made the choice to go that route because that's how they were going to check us. So I could have used a Colorado product, but I wanted to use the products they were going to use to check us, to have more confidence that what we were seeing is what they were going to see. But I think in round 4, as we do that round, I am going to be more open to using some Colorado products if they show the story and can paint the picture. And I think we've figured out how to make sure that fits in with that type of application. But really, they had it more prescribed to us as to what to use and their tools. So it didn't give us as much flexibility in round 3 to look for Colorado specific things. But I would have appreciated the flexibility. So.
Yeah, just to jump in and talk a little bit about the monitoring program for furworm. We do have a long-term monitoring program that we take pre and post project data points and kind of follow the projects. I believe it's 5 years post treatment, just to kind of learn from the project work using adaptive management, and it helps us guide treatments moving into the future. And one thing that I'll speak on a little bit later once we start talking about some of our capacity projects and how we're incorporating monitoring into how we're hoping to monitor some capacity projects starting this year, rather than just the fuels and forest health projects. That's something we haven't done in the past. But that is something that's written into the legislation that we monitor for furworm projects. And so we do have that funding through that legislation, and that's something that we have a small team working on every year, and they select a handful of projects around the state that they go and do take data points every year, every season. And we do have kind of a running list of projects as they get completed that we use as success stories. And we haven't had any recent fires go through any furworm project treatments that I know of as of right now. But I think that's something that we will continue to look for and use those stories to talk about as success stories. Courtney, go ahead.
To clarify, mostly because I'm taking notes and I'm curious, is it all furworm projects that you're monitoring for 5 years? Okay, you said just a handful every year.
Yeah, we don't have the capacity to be able to monitor every single project because depending on the year, we can award 35 projects or we can award 70 projects every single year. So, and they're 4-year projects, so that, I think I have roughly 150 active furworm projects right now. And our monitoring team is two full-time staff right now. And then they have some seasonal staff to help take those data points every year. So yeah, it's usually 5 to 10 projects that they select depending on the size of the projects that they'll follow through the life and 5 years post award.
Awesome. That makes sense. Sounds way, I was going to be mind blown if you were doing that for all Fur projects.
Any more questions on that? As Chad mentioned, we have some talking points for capacity match and timeline, all of your prompts that you wanted us to talk about. So we can jump into that if there aren't any more specific questions. Okay. So Chad, jump in whenever you want. But just to start with the capacity, as I mentioned in my quick presentation, Furworm does have that built-in capacity specific project type, which has been really helpful for us. And Diana, jump in if you remember the process that went into getting that built into Furworm, because that was before my time. But that has been really helpful, and we've heard a lot of great feedback on having that as a project type. It is limited to 25% of the total available allocation that we have. Let's see, what other notes do I have on that? Something. Oh, someone trying to jump in and say something. Something that I wanted to note on that is that it can be used for earlier stages of readiness, because the planning phase of a project would qualify. An additional challenge with that would be having too many applicants submitting for that capacity for the planning phase, because we really do want these Furworm dollars to go to projects that are ready to go, because we only have so much capacity up front to work on those projects, the planning or the pre-proposal portion of those projects, because our field staff is helping develop those projects up front during that RFA period. So that would, if we had a lot of projects in the earlier stages, reaching out for assistance with our CSFS staff, helping to get them to that development stage, that would put a big burden on us, I think, up front. Clyde, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment there. I think our experience has been that the capacity building grants were very useful in increasing velocity and enthusiasm for the program. So we get a lot of volunteer hours. And it is an excellent way for large projects. I mean, doing 1 acre, 5 acres really doesn't qualify for a chipper or a air curtain or that kind of stuff. But we have enough. We had 1,700 bags of cleanliness in there in this spring. So we're busy and using the equipment. That's a real positive note for projects that really have some size to them. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I'll add on the capacity side to echo here what Kayla said. For CWDG, it's a little different. This grant program compared to the other two federal grants I oversee, SFA, WUI, and CAFA, this one had a lot of flexibility built in because the dollar amounts were so much higher than anything I've ever seen for implementation grants, in that you could ask for $10 million with no match. I have seen some of our awardees where they're spending millions on capacity to then administer the projects or hire the fuels crew themselves on the fire district. So there was a lot of flexibility with capacity in the CWDG program, and I've seen it give us better returns by having less ornery rules on how we can truly spend that money, and giving us that freedom and flexibility to not have to be super concerned about, are we spending too much on capacity or not? we're trying to get a lot accomplished with those bigger dollar amounts. So it's been good to see that flexibility on capacity and from that perspective. But beyond that, the other ways I look at capacity are there's got to be the ability to manage the grants. And so capacity also means, you know, organizations like where I work, you know, the finance people, the technical folks like myself or Kayla, a lot of times we're bare bonesing kind of the amount we can take off of federal grants to then make sure we have the capacity to have speedier reimbursements or faster awards get out the door. When we don't have speedy reimbursements, what happens? If we're not getting the funding on that capacity to administer these things well, then those fire districts and watershed coalitions that don't have the cash flow, they have to wait much longer for those reimbursements, and that causes big effects on those folks. And I see that a lot. So, you know, funding the capacity to manage, which is really the admin and overhead and indirect, those terms that right now a lot of folks think are kind of fluff and that, you know, we shouldn't fund and we should reduce their rates. They're very important and very critical, mainly because I've been on the awardee side in my career and I've been now on the management side of grants. So I've seen it from both sides, how critical it is to have the capacity to manage the grant like we're doing, but also the capacity, like I think you folks have referred to here, to implement the project if you're at the fire district or oversee the contract. I mean, those are important pieces for sure. So.
One thing I could add here is we've opted to, we worked with contractors when we first started doing grants and fire mitigation. But we soon found that some of the contractors were pretty unreliable. So we've gone to employees, and our HOA has actually hired correct employees to carry out the mission. And so we've been very happy with that. We've been using some of the staff from Lada Electric, some of their tree climbers. They climb to protect power lines from trees falling down. So it's worked well for us. I don't know if it worked well for everybody else. Employees seems to be a good way for us.
Go ahead and
Maybe I'll jump in. And Kayla, you mentioned you weren't sure how the capacity building kind of came into 4WRM grant. I think it's a story worth telling, and then it will lead to a question of how can we change things to make it better in the future too. So that started with, you mentioned the 4WRM is currently a merger of previous grant programs, the Forest Restoration Grant, and then also the previous Department of Natural Resources Wildfire Risk Reduction Grant Program. Full transparency, I was hired at CFRI. My first job at CFRI was to do monitoring on that DNR grant program in 2013. So I know it quite well. That grant started with fire mitigation implementation and also had a separate bucket for people to buy equipment as kind of a capacity building if you want to buy a chipper, or some people bought boilers in there to use the wood to heat their shop, kind of thing. Over time, the people that now Katie is coordinating, the forest collaboratives throughout the state, made the case over and over again that we need this capacity funding. And the state legislature changed that over time to fund actual personnel and planning and the capacity we're talking about. So as we're talking about what are the barriers, how do we overcome them? It can be done and has been done and has been changed to open it up to be much more. And I think that's important for us to understand as we're talking about this, that's directly where that came from and how that's in there now. Started as you can buy a chipper, and now you can hire someone to facilitate meetings, and has expanded a lot. So I think and Diana or others who are there who have a different version of that history, feel free to correct and jump in. But my question then is, what have we, like, I hear you, Chad, about the funding for the sort of that capacity and that back end technical capacity and administrative capacity of the people actually administering the grant. I couldn't agree more. Those people are essential. What is, if that's one thing, what is something else that you hear or that we hear as a leveraging resources committee that we would want to work on with our state legislature to keep improving these programs? And what is thinking not as much about CW, the federal CWDG, but at the state level where we are State Forest Health Council, we have the power to make those recommendations now and make that change faster maybe than it has in the past.
Well, Brett, I like that question. I thought about it and I have a few quick bullet points of probably things I've seen as barriers my entire career, being on the awardee side and the management side, of what didn't allow me when I was on that side or this side to kind of do the things we were envisioning, you know, what was holding us back. It seems like one that always stands out to me is you have to be a financial engineer, and almost a minimum every project I approached, I would have state and federal funding both, because it was the only way I could leverage those matches and match both of those together. And that allowed me at Boulder County, where I worked priorly, to grow a program kind of quicker by leveraging it faster, by having almost at a minimum those two funding sources on every project. The other thing, though, that held us back at Boulder County when I was there is we would see a notice of funding opportunity go out, and immediately leadership would want an application in for every notice of funding opportunity that went out. But it didn't mean that we were quite ready to apply. And so I wanted to make a bumper sticker in those days that I heard all the time, you know, don't worry about the details now. Let's apply for the grant, get the money here, and worry about the details later. Well, every time I've experienced that, and you don't worry about the details up front, they cost you quite a bit in time, modification, money, miscommunication when you get the grant award. So it seems like there needs to be a pretty serious investment somehow in pre-planning work before as you're applying to the grant application itself. And that's always something that's been underfunded and not taken as seriously. But I see a lot of effects that come from it. I think, you know, the allowable items a lot of times are fairly restrictive on grants. Luckily, the grant program I'm overseeing now, there's a lot more flexibility on equipment purchases and capacity. But when those aren't present, a lot of times there were times I didn't apply for a grant because it was not going to be helpful to get some money here to do something on the ground if I didn't have a way to oversee it, manage it, do all those other tasks. So I think, you know, the capacity and the allowable items, and then mixed ownerships. When you're trying to work with one grant across multiple ownerships, that can be extremely difficult with the rules and regs that are different and processes and policies, you know, between different entities. I think the last thing I'll mention is that, you know, timelines, it just takes a long time to apply for these grants, get them scored, get them awarded, you know, get them on the ground. And that there are probably some efficiencies that can be found in timelines, but that's a more difficult one for me to kind of look at. I think lastly, what I'm most concerned about right now when I look at grants is when I started in this field in 1997, and I think about what was available to us to apply to in those days. There really wasn't anything. We mostly went on fires, and when we weren't busy on those, we might brush out some roads. But we didn't have grants to apply for. We didn't have a lot of these funding sources we're talking about. In the early 2000s, those showed up with CAFA, SFA WUI, and HB 1199 with the State Forest Service. And so those opportunities are what allowed, I think, some opportunities to be had by land managers, those kind of funding sources showing up on the scene. Now, where we have CWDG and the bipartisan infrastructure law, we were so close to having $66 billion in funding, and two senators sunk that. So we ended up with $6 billion, which was still historic. But now as I'm looking forward, it's starting to look like on the federal side, it could resemble what it looked like when I started my career. And I'm quite shocked how quick that reversal has happened. And I felt that might be good for this group to think about. What does that mean for what, your mission and role is? Because we may have to think about more state investment if the feds are going to abandon, I think, some of these programs that, we've relied upon. So I'm concerned about those things, as well as these other things that you've got kind of in the bins, that I think are solvable, like Brett talks about, if we hit them hard. So, but those are a few items off the top of my head. So.
I know we just have a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to mention a couple other things that we had. One of the bigger challenges that I hear from a lot of our smaller partners is really just the reimbursement-based structure, and partners having to front the project costs and then get reimbursed, which that's just something that us being housed under CSU, we don't have flexibility with. On our end, there are options that we've been hearing a lot about, like conservation finance opportunities. I don't know a lot about that, but that's a lot that I've been hearing other people talk about. And I've heard that some of the smaller partners will work with local credit unions to get low or no interest loans to help kind of pay for, if they're buying a big piece of equipment, to help buy that piece of equipment up front and then get reimbursed for it and then pay that loan back in like a pretty quick turnaround. And then some other things I wanted to just bring up as far as Furworm goes and things that are a little bit restrictive on my end. From a program manager side, we have some legislative requirements that are a little bit challenging at times with the technical advisory panel and the makeup of who is on that panel, especially right now with some of the challenges that our federal partners are dealing with. We have some requirements to have federal partners on that panel, and some within the biomass and forest product industries, and that's really difficult to recruit people in some of those categories right now. And I've also been hearing from our internal staff that projects that get funded through Furworm aren't always where our internal staff has spent their efforts in that pre-application process. And so there's like a misalignment with funded projects and where the efforts are going up front. And so it would be really nice to have more flexibility with those legislative requirements for that advisory panel, and maybe even more inclusion with our CSFS staff priorities, and if they could have more of a say in where those projects, where the funds go, if that makes sense. So I don't know if that's some of the information you're hoping to hear from us today or not, but just thought I'd throw that out there. I have some ideas and that I've been working on to just try to make the program a little more efficient on our end. We continue to grow, and we're getting more and more applications every year. And so figuring out a way to reduce the number of applications that aren't quite ready to go or aren't project ready, implementation ready, is one of my plans. Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, that's a great foundation for kind of these conversations that this group has been having. So I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Brett said about the capacity component and how that was originally in the Furworm program, but it was really focused on equipment purchases, and then legislative changes, broadened that scope. There was legislative changes that allowed for the reduced match in those areas of, socially vulnerable areas. We have a lot of flexibility with allowable items, being able to purchase equipment compared to federal dollars. So I think there have been really positive and, good success stories as far as changes that have allowed more flexibility with the program. When we run into issues is when there's a lot of added complications of trying to throw more and more things into the program, and it becomes really kind of unwieldy. So I think You know, just allowing for as much flexibility as possible makes it easier for us to have, you know, consistent timelines that we're going to just say every year, this is what it's going to be. I think that's the other thing is we were able to get this funding from a tier 2 tax level funded program to like general funds. And that has been a significant difference in how much we can invest and how much, you know, we can confidently tell people across the state that this program, we're going to, you know, have another round next year. You'll be able to apply again. So in the past, we just never knew if we were going to have funding for it. So having that consistent funding has made a huge difference too. So I think there's been a lot of success stories. And I think, as Kayla mentioned, there's like other things we can do to kind of continue that. With the state funding in particular, we know with federal dollars and federal funding programs, we don't have as much flexibility. And so we try to work around those with, especially like timelines. We've tried to always like work the FirWorm application timeline to work for not only applicants, but also the technical advisory panel that has to review those and then being able to get those awards out and hopefully not running into the same, you know, application deadlines as our federal program. So just, it's something we kind of are constantly working through, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw all that back in there too as well. So thanks.
Maybe I'll jump in. I know we only have 2 minutes left. I think this is a great example also of opportunity to turn the Forest Resilience Planning Guide into legislation and sort of passing it to the legislative committee to see what that would look like. For example, the FirWorm and program now, it has all these great things, but exactly what you're saying, Diana, there's all these little requirements of you have to have a biomass plan and you have to, if you work with Youth Corps, and there's all these little things that have been added over the years. And if there's a way that we can actually provide less line by line, you should do this or shouldn't do that, and more broad, follow this plan and point to me in this plan where you're doing things, that is more comprehensive. I wonder if that would be better for applicants as well as the grant administrators. I think it's worth exploring how we improve the program without adding more line by line, thou shalt do this, that, or the other.
Well, as the chair of the legislative committee, I certainly can add this to our list of items that we're going to start looking at building out our agendas for the rest of the year. So.
Awesome. Good ideas. Yes, I am looking at the time and I hate to cut off a very lively discussion. I would love to pick some of this stuff back up next time. I don't know, we can work around schedules and stuff. If maybe Chad and Kayla, you might be available to come back, or if we can just kind of talk more as a group and then, you know, bounce ideas off of you. But yeah, I've got a couple of follow-ups in my notes, and I just want to thank you all for a really great discussion. And please follow up if you have anything to add that we should kind of keep in mind, since, you know, we always got to wrap up. So yeah, with that, thanks everyone, and have a really good rest of your week. Do I need a motion to adjourn? How many times have I done this and I ask every time?
I'm going to say thank you, State Forest Service, for all you do in presenting this great information. And then I'll give a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion. Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Much, and
Thank you.
thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Thanks.